All right. Okay, so thank you all so much for joining today. My name is Kelsey Ellis, and I am the Impact Program Manager at ZAP. Just a few logistics for our workshop today. We are recording this, and I will have this posted up on our website probably by the end of next week, middle or end of next week. And also following the workshop today, I will send you an email that includes a survey for you to provide some feedback on the workshop and your experience, as well as we have a takeaway kind of handout for this, and I'll have that attached in the email. While we're on the call, if you would just please check that you stay muted. If you have questions, you can throw them in the chat. I'll be monitoring that. And then we'll have some time for questions at the end as well. I'm going to make a little plug for our next ZAP workshop. That's going to be an in-person workshop here at the Mid-Valley Performing Arts Center, which will be on Thursday, July 16th. It is 9:45 to noon. We're talking about an interesting topic around future planning or scenario planning, as well as change management tactics. So actually, Jody Graham here on the call will be one of our presenters, and we have a few other presenters, and we'll have a discussion with those presenters afterwards as well. So should be a great event. I'm going to drop the link to where you can find that information in the chat here in a minute. But also just make sure if you're not following our socials or subscribe to our newsletter, that's the best place to find information about what's happening at ZAP. And before I turn the time over, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate you all joining us today to really learn more and be engaged in this topic around really an evolving tool. I think personally, it's really important for us to continue these conversations and understand AI for organizations. And really just what its current kind of capabilities and limitations are so that we can decide what we want to do with that. So I'm really excited, as I said, to have this topic as one of our workshops today. And we have this amazing presenter, Leah Summers. I've worked with her for many years. She's an amazing human, and I'm excited to have her talk about this topic. She's an advisor and project manager at Pathway Group. And she's been doing work here in our arts and culture and nonprofit community for a long time. So with that, I will go ahead and turn the time over to Leah. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, let me get my screen share in here. Let me know when everybody can see. All good? Can see?
Looks
okay,
good.
Okay, great. Well, okay, so hello, everybody. It is really great to be here with you all today. And thank you so much, Kelsey, and to the whole ZAP team for having me. And thanks to all of you for joining. As Kelsey said, my name is Leah Summers, and I'm with Pathway Group. If you are not familiar with us, we are a consulting firm based in Salt Lake City that primarily works with nonprofit and government organizations. And I joined Pathway about 3 years ago after finishing my MBA at the University of Utah. Go Utes. And my emphasis in my MBA was business analytics. I am a data nerd at heart. Data has always fascinated me. I love the patterns in it. I love what it can tell us. I love figuring out kind of what we can do with just information generally. And, how I come to this topic is ChatGPT debuted about 6 months before I graduated. So I had been spending the 2 years, almost 2 years up to that point, studying the underlying science of these large language models or generally machine learning and how the data modeling works, how the pattern recognition works. But I had never imagined this technology at a scale or accessibility of something like ChatGPT. So when it dropped, I was absolutely floored, and I have been experimenting and researching and a little low grade obsessed with these tools ever since. And really what I care about most is being able to help organizations use AI as safely and thoughtfully as possible, because I do think that the technology can be genuinely transformative for nonprofits, but it comes, as Kelsey mentioned, with real limitations. And AI has become so prevalent so quickly that understanding those limitations isn't optional anymore. And that's what today's about. So we'll go through kind of all the basic fundamental stuff. We'll talk about the risks, and we'll talk about some ways to use it thoughtfully. So let's jump in. AI is everywhere. You've probably been hearing about it constantly from your board, from your funders, from your peers, from your staff, from the news. And, it can create this low grade anxiety feeling that everyone else has figured out something that you haven't yet, and that the train is leaving and you're still on the platform. And honestly, I live and work and study and kind of just am always a little bit tinkering with these tools. And I even feel that. So I want to acknowledge that feeling if you're feeling it, because it's real, it's widespread. And I also want to tell you that if you are a leader of an organization that hasn't figured out how it's going to use AI, you are far from behind. And the organizations that will use AI well are not necessarily the ones that jump in first. They are the ones who are going to take the time to understand it, to know what they're really actually working with. And there are really big unresolved questions swirling around this technology. There are policy questions, ethical questions, questions about the impact that we don't know yet, we can't know yet. And we're not going to solve really any of those today, but you will have, by the end of this, enough of a foundation to navigate them thoughtfully. So, what we'll cover today is what is AI? What actually is it? And where can it be useful for your work? And where should you pump the brakes and think about adopting these tools in a way that is intentional rather than reactive? So let's dive in. So let's start with the basics. We're going all the way to what is AI. So generally speaking, there are actually 4 types of artificial intelligence. There is reactive, limited memory machines, theory of mind, and self-aware. So these 2 types up top, reactive and limited memory machines, these exist today and impact our lives right now, while the other 2 are still theoretical, being researched, and each kind of builds on the next. So I'm going to quickly explain each type, because understanding how the existing types of AI work is actually pretty important for understanding their capabilities and limitations. So starting with the existing ones, reactive machines comb through a massive amount of data to produce specific outputs. So they're really trained on, if this thing triggers, conduct this action as a response. But they don't have any memory, and they have a pretty limited ability to predict outcomes. So an example of a reactive machine is any kind of smart device, or recommendation algorithms like the Netflix, like, you might enjoy this based on the things that you've already watched. So that's an example of a reactive machine. A limited memory machine is kind of that next level up, and that's the ability, all the abilities of a reactive machine, but it also has the added capability to remember past inputs, to evaluate past patterns and outcomes, to continually learn and improve. And it does get better over time at predicting outcomes. But what it can't really understand is like every kind of context. And examples of limited memory machines are LLMs, right? Large language models like ChatGPT or Claude. This is what we're mostly going to talk about today. When I say AI, I'm mostly referring to this type, right? Self-driving cars are actually another example of a limited memory machine. So we're seeing them pop up in different ways right now. So moving to the types that don't yet exist, the theory of mind piece, this is kind of the next level up from where we are right now. And this type of AI does not currently exist. It's being researched. I think it's being developed. But this type of AI would have that ability to understand additional context about the world. And that might include emotions as much as a computer can understand emotions, can understand more complex interactions, and predict actual behaviors with some level of accuracy. But it wouldn't be self-aware. It wouldn't understand it was AI. It wouldn't understand that people are people and it is a computer. It wouldn't understand those things. So a good example for understanding what theory of mind would be is what is called the Sally-Ann test. And scientists disagree all over about what the threshold of theory of mind is. So just take it as a high level grain of salt. You can think about it as just, at its most basic level, reading between the lines. What the Sally-Ann test is, to illustrate kind of the reading between the lines point, is, let's say there are Sally and Ann in a room playing with a toy. And Sally puts the toy in a box and leaves the room. Ann takes the toy out of the box sneakily and puts it behind a pillow. Now, when Sally comes back into the room, Anne knows that Sally will look for the toy in the box where Sally thinks it is, but not where it actually is. That is Anne's theory of Sally's mind. So AI cannot yet make these types of connections consistently enough for scientists to believe that where we're at today, these models have a theory of mind. And this is the kind of context that humans inherently understand. If we were watching this scenario play out from a bird's eye view, we would know, oh, Sally thinks it's in the box and moved it and sneaky. We would know right away that somebody didn't have all the information, and we would understand that context. The self-aware type of AI is definitely the furthest out. I have the kind of Blade Runner poster here because in a nutshell, that's kind of what it would be. It doesn't exist, but this type of AI would understand that it's AI. It would understand what information it has. It would understand its capabilities. It could potentially have its own emotions. And a self-aware AI would just absolutely surpass the capabilities of the human mind. We are so far away from that right now. I really can't stress that enough. So when I say AI today, when I'm just talking about AI, I'm talking about type 2. I'm talking about limited memory machines, specifically talking about LLMs like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Grok, whatever you use. That's kind of what we'll be focusing on today. Okay, so so now that we know what AI is, let's talk about how it works. The simplified version, because there is actually kind of a lot of math involved, but this will be a mathless explanation, and it will matter a lot when we get into the risks and how you use it in practice, how these actually work. So large language models are built on kind of two things working together. The first is pattern recognition across, I mean, an unfathomable amount of text and image data. So we're talking like the whole internet, basically. Every book that's ever been written, every album that's ever been produced, everything has been fed into these models. And the model has processed all of that information and has basically learned what words tend to appear together and what responses tend to follow what kinds of questions. But pattern recognition alone isn't really enough to make that useful. So the second ingredient is millions of human provided instructions that teach the model which patterns are helpful, which are relevant, and which are frankly appropriate. So, it's not giving you ideas about, maybe terrible things that have happened in history as a neutral starting point. It has some of this context trained into it. And the result, of course, is this technology that is really good at producing outputs that feel right. And they sound coherent and confident and responsive to exactly what you asked. And that's exactly why we really need to understand these next 2 points. So two critical things that I really want you to hold on to as we continue this conversation today. The first is that ChatGPT and every other LLM, they do not know what they are saying to you. They are trained to sound helpful and keep you engaged. And I'm sure ChatGPT users have especially noticed the tendency to proactively offer to complete another task that you didn't ask for at the end of each output. Like, now I can put it into a PowerPoint. Would you like that? And sometimes you're like, I kind of. And other times you're like, no, thanks. I'm going to move on to the next thing. But what they're doing is they're drawing on patterns and they don't actually have any kind of true understanding, even though it can sometimes feel like they do. They also, and this is very important, carry no accountability for whether what they tell you is true or safe or appropriate for your situation or the complete amount of information you need to make a decision. That responsibility stays with the human. The other thing I really want to make sure is very clear is these models are continuing to learn and refine themselves through their interactions with millions of users every single day. So even the scientists who built them do not have a full, clear window into exactly how they're making decisions and reaching their conclusions. And this is because largely the computers are translating the words that we use into numbers. And we don't have a clear way of understanding what those numbers actually equate to in human language. And that kind of sounds a little bit freaky, but that's exactly why governance and how we use these tools matters, which is what we're going to talk about next. So if you haven't noticed, I'm kind of trying to get the scary stuff out of the way. And this is where it gets really scary. We're going to talk about some risk categories that your organization, every organization really needs to be thinking about. The top, of course, is inaccuracies and bias. LLMs can reflect bias in ways that are really difficult to not only predict, but to even see. And that is because the data that they're trained on came from people, and people have bias. Also, as we've discussed, they can be wrong, they can give wrong or dangerous information, and the platform does not face any consequences when that happens. The users do. So the next big kind of risk is data security. Most LLMs, as we just talked about, use your inputs to continue to improve the models. Now, where that can get kind of tricky, there was recently a legal case where a man copied and pasted some emails from his attorney on some kind of court case he was working on into ChatGPT to work on a response to his attorney to kind of do some strategizing for his court case. And his confidential case information showed up in another user's output. So the LLM was taking the information and adding it to its knowledge base, and then it took that confidential information and gave it to somebody else. And a judge ended up ruling that any information the man shared with an LLM, was no longer protected by attorney-client privilege. That's a really big consequence to really just trying to do the right thing and strategize for something you're working on. Next, there are pretty big let me go back to the data security. Some platforms allow users to opt out of this. And you might already know that. You might have been sort of like, well, I can opt out. And most platforms allow paid users to opt out of using your information to train the models. Claude, for now, allows even the free users to opt out if they so choose. But the honest truth here is, honestly, it is not verifiable whether or not your data is being safeguarded. Plus, if the data that you're putting into these LLMs is still being held by the company, even if it's telling you that it's not using it to train the models, if it's being held for its own memory, it can be hacked. And so that's another data and security risk that you have, even if you're a paid user, even if you are not allowing the LLM to use your information to train its models. So that's another aspect of data security that I want to make sure is clear. Ethics and trust. So we're going to get into ethics and trust here. And there are really broad questions about the ethics of using this technology, like it is used copyrighted material and it's training data, human intellectual property, and the plus the significant energy and water needs of these data centers, the questions about whose voices and perspectives are overrepresented in the training data versus whose might be missing. And then, of course, the unknown long-term implications for the workforce, which I know is a really high anxiety feeling right now for a lot of us. There is also this kind of looming potential trust dilemma in addition to the ethical issues. So if you take the ChatGPT attorney privilege example that I just mentioned, as it relates to data and security, let's say a well-meaning board member uses an LLM to thank a donor for a generous gift, right? That happens all the time. And maybe they type in, "Dear Mr. Ryan Smith, thank you for giving your $2 million to our organization." What if that information shows up in a random user's output? Hopefully that was intended to be public. Otherwise, there is a high risk of a major trust violation with honestly no ill will intent. So it's very important to understand where the kind of pitfalls are in using these tools and how it can have ramifications that are very unexpected and very unintended from even kind of run-of-the-mill easy use cases, right? And then finally, with our kind of risks and governance overview, the tool landscape. There are now just hundreds and thousands of AI-powered tools on the market, and that number is just going to continue to grow. And they all promise to do miracle things. Evaluating that they can do what they say they are going to do securely and reliably, and that what they do is going to be a good fit for your specific work is very hard, and it's going to continue to be hard. But I'm here to tell you that as you're being bombarded with all of these tools and all of the people trying to get a piece of the significant economic investment in these tools, you're going to have to take the time to vet your tools and kind of suffer through the consequences if something goes wrong. So this is another example of kind of the slow, steady approach might end up being the winner of who is using these tools. Okay, so all the risk and governance leads me to a bit of a call to action. So I think every single organization needs to start thinking about an AI use policy and to address some of these risk and governance issues. And here is why. First, AI is probably being used whether you've approved it or not. I'm sure many of your staff members are experimenting. You might personally be experimenting. And when you don't have any standards or quality thresholds, you risk exposure. And that inconsistent use can have consequences. It might be as small as different teams using AI in different ways, and that mixes up the quality and the sort of voice and tone of outputs and things like that. And it might also cause a lot of confusion about what's allowed, what's not allowed, what's ethical to do in a work context versus not. And all of that confusion has consequences. Of course, the risks to using these tools are not hypothetical. We've talked about some real world examples. I'm sure you know of many of your own or have read about them in like regular news media. Sensitive data can be exposed, outputs can be biased or inaccurate or misleading, and the accountability is just really is heavy on the weights of the organizations here. So these risks to using these tools without any kind of guidance are not hypothetical, and yet without guidance, momentum stalls. If staffer or board members are unsure about what is safe and they avoid using AI entirely, or it's possible that they overuse it in ways that create risks, all of these problems can stall the momentum of your organization. And these tools, as much as they have these kind of limitations and challenges and risks, they have the power to be truly transformative. And the reality is, this is embedded into our lives now. Google, there is no Google that is not also AI at this point. So if you use Google, you use AI. Even if you don't use Claude or ChatGPT and you don't think you're using AI, you're using AI. And if you continue to try to hide from it, you will fall behind. If you're not using AI, your peers are, and you will start to feel that kind of the train has left me feeling, and it'll happen quickly. So for all of these reasons, I urge you to start thinking about an AI use policy. But in the meantime, let's talk about some ways that you can use it and think about using it in your organization, because an AI use policy needs to be specific to you and it needs to revolve around how it can work for you. So let's talk about how it can work for you. Here are some things that LLMs are particularly good at. They're great at summarizing information. Like we talked about, they're not always great at context, so it can get some things wrong, which is why you need some human supervision to go through it and make some small edits to those summaries. LLMs are amazing at brainstorming because at their core, they're just recognizing patterns. And it might be putting a pattern in front of you that you haven't identified for yourself yet. That can be so powerful in brainstorming. It's really good at organizing information, so it can draft frameworks and reformat content with relative ease. All things that you can do yourself, of course, but this is just doing it much faster. And then helping you to kind of take a whole brain dump of ideas and structure them into something you can do something with. Those are all the things that LLMs are really good at, and they're huge time savers. Okay, so what are they bad at? So as we've talked about, they're bad at verifying facts. They are just putting patterns of words together. They don't really have a way of knowing what's true and what's not, aside from whatever human code interpretation inputs they've been given. And of course, there are things that these humans and these companies are adding every single day because you can't think of every fact that might need to be verified by these models. As we've mentioned, they're terrible at human judgment. They cannot make judgment calls. They can only put patterns in front of you, of the user, but they can't have any kind of judgment. They don't handle confidential data safely. Again, everything's an input, everything's part of a pattern. So it's not good at figuring out maybe what shouldn't be shared. And then, of course, producing final content without human review. This, I think, is important to stress and to slow down on because, as we've mentioned, these outputs are incredibly polished. They are very confident and they seem right. They're designed to be helpful. But if you are not reviewing line by line carefully, you will start to find errors in this content. And nothing that an LLM does should ever be passed through and considered final without very careful human review. And then perhaps one of the most important things, especially as we're talking professionally, is LLMs cannot replace subject matter expertise like marketing expertise, legal analysis, anything that has a lot of context that requires human judgment. An LLM cannot do. And I'm sure I use the example of social media marketing all the time. I use social media as an individual, but I'm not a social media marketer. And I know that there is a science and an art to social media marketing. So if I were to ask an LLM to make me a social media marketing plan, I wouldn't be able to review it. I wouldn't know what the nuances are, what type of advice it puts together for me are specific to my organization or would work best for the type of work that I do. Only kind of a human with more depth of context can put those types of things together. AI is not there yet. So let's just watch this short little clip.
How many R's are there in strawberry?
Strawberry has 2 R's in it.
Are you sure?
Absolutely sure. There's an R after the T and another one near the end, so 2 R's it is.
Okay, so I think that there are 3 R's.
I see what's going on. But if we count them together, there's 1 R after the T and 1 right before the Y. So that does add up to just 2 R's in strawberry.
Okay.
Maybe one of them is just feeling extra noticeable.
Yeah, so you're actually spelling it. It's getting transcribed with 2 R's before the Y.
Oh, I see the mix-up now. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, it's definitely just the 2 R's and the word itself, but no worries. Glad we got that cleared up.
Okay, no, it's 3 R's, right? It's 3 R's because it's 1 after the T, and then in the word berry, you know that word, berry? There's 2 R's in berry.
I get what you're saying now. You're counting the berry part as if it had 2 R's on its own.
No, I'm not counting it as if it had 2 R's. It has 2 R's.
All right, I see where the confusion is coming from. I promise I'm not trying to be stubborn here. In the standard spelling of strawberry, there's just 1 R in straw and 1 R in berry. So
no, there aren't.
Okay, so that actually goes on. It was super viral. You might have seen something similar, but I showed this clip, as funny as it is, to demonstrate what frequently happens in less obvious ways. LLMs will confidently give you super wrong information, and they will sometimes hold firm when they're challenged. And what this means for you is that you should use ChatGPT and other LLMs to maximize your own expertise, not to lean on it for expertise to fill gaps in your own expertise, but to maximize what you already know. You should not rely on them to complete complex work that you wouldn't be able to verify is not only correct, but complete and accounting for all of the context that is relevant to our work. So I gave the example about not being a social media marketing expert and why I wouldn't want to use it in that way. But when I'm trying to think about like, okay, well, how should I use ChatGPT? I try to ask myself these sort of 3 guiding questions. And the first one is, do I understand the subject well enough to review the output? Can I verify for accuracy and completeness? And does this use personally identifiable information? And the personally identifiable information piece goes right back to the risks that we just all talked about. And so if I can confidently answer these questions as yes and no, well, then it's probably okay to try AI. And this is the guiding kind of framework that I would encourage you to think about and to use as you're developing an AI use policy, which I hope you all do. Okay, I'm going to go to the next screen and maybe not play this video again. Okay, so where can AI actually move the needle for a nonprofit? Let me walk you through kind of 5 real practical value examples. So I think operations and administration is probably the most immediate win for a lot of organizations that I can see. When I think about all the time that goes into scheduling meetings and writing notes and summarizing documents and creating templates and drafting policies and procedures and making sure they're organized in a way that everybody can find, these tasks eat up so many hours that don't require human judgment. And at every single step, it does require some human judgment, but not at every single step. And AI can take a significant chunk of the time that it takes to just build things out off your plate. Development and communications is, I think, another high value area. Of course, development is another one of those pieces where it is both an art and a science and requires a huge amount of human judgment to do well. But organizing a content calendar, drafting donor communications, repurposing maybe a grant report into a newsletter and using a lot of that same information. These are all things that AI can help you do quickly, even if a human is doing the refining and, of course, all of the relationship work. Talent, institutional knowledge is one that I find very compelling for nonprofits, especially because this sector has real challenges with succession planning, as I have seen. And it's because so much organizational knowledge lives inside people's heads. And when they leave, that organizational knowledge walks out the door with them. So AI can help you document the roles and responsibilities and capture processes and build the kind of institutional memory that makes transitions much more smooth and totally survivable. Brainstorming, we've talked about brainstorming. It's my favorite way to use these tools. As we've discussed, they are at their core pattern recognizers, and they can put a pattern in front of you that maybe you've recognized yourself a little bit or haven't quite grasped or is totally new. And it can help you see a new perspective within a situation that might be pretty familiar. And then finally, drafting internal materials. So things like emails, meeting agendas, newsletter outlines, quick summaries of recap meetings, things like that. They don't necessarily do the super polished external stuff. I wouldn't necessarily rely on them for all of that or heavily for all of that. But for the internal communication that keeps an organization functioning, AI can get you a pretty good first draft. And for a lot of nonprofits who are wearing a million hats, or nonprofit staff who are wearing a million hats, it's not a small thing to save 3 minutes on an email here, 10 minutes on a summary recap here. I mean, these minutes add up. And none of these high impact use cases are about replacing people. None of them. They are giving your team back some of the time and energy that gets consumed by the operational weight of running an organization, so they can focus on the work that actually requires the human judgment, the passion, all of the things that people bring into the occasion. Okay, so we talked about the use cases. Let's talk about how to actually start using an LLM. As you may know, it's all about the prompt. So I use a prompt framework that I just think about in this way. I think of it shorthand as COCO, and what COCO stands for is context, objective, constraints, and outputs. And so what you want to tell the model, the LLM, the ChatGPT, the Claude, is give it as much basic context about your industry and subject matter as you can. It shouldn't use any personal identifiable information, but if you're saying, I am an organization that provides arts programming to youth, that's probably a good enough amount of context. You can add more if you need more for your particular task. And then the objective, tell the model what you want to achieve and what you're asking the model to do. I need help building out a calendar of event activities or developing a schedule, whatever you need. And then you need to define the boundaries of your task. Like, we have 5 staff people working on this. We have a limited budget, whatever your boundaries or constraints are, you can kind of provide that context to the model so it doesn't end up giving you a solution that you're like, that won't work for me. And then output. This is kind of the sleeper that I think most people are not doing. You can tell the model exactly what format you'd like the output to take. And I think most people are just used to getting paragraphs of text, maybe some bullet points. Personally, I love a graph. I love to compare and contrast. I love to see things neatly organized into categories. So I very often tell an LLM to give me a graph, pros and cons, whatever it is. I love to see it in a graph. And I think if you tell it exactly the output that you're looking for, it starts to feel more relevant in a lot of different ways. So that's kind of the framework for like how to start building out a prompt, but let's see it in action. If everybody could maybe just add into the chat which of these use cases feels more valuable to you, we can do kind of a quick basic live demo that can feel more relevant to some of you here today. And Kelsey, I'll have to have you help me
Absolutely.
with keeping a tally on where the votes end up. Okay.
Oh, well, there's one in each category right now.
Oh, good. We need some tiebreakers.
So we need some tiebreakers. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well,
See
we
a lot
have
of off.
3 for ups. That might be a good one just to start with.
Okay, great. And these are, I put together some pretty basic, like made up scenarios for us to start with. But if anybody wants to be brave and give us a scenario that they're currently working on, we can work from that. But otherwise, this is the scenario that I came up with, is like, maybe you have gotten some recent feedback from volunteers that your onboarding or your volunteer program is kind of inconsistent. You got some issues and you've got some notes, you've had a meeting, and you need to figure out how to turn all of the feedback that you've gotten into a list of actions that you can digest, you can plan, and you can easily execute, right? So does anybody have any, like, they're dying to use a different example? Otherwise, we'll go with this one and see what we get.
I think you are free to go.
Okay, let's do it, you guys. Okay, so I'm gonna, I made a hidden link here. You can still see my screen, right?
Yep,
Okay.
we got it.
You ChatGPT now?
Nope, it's still the slideshow.
Oh, of course. All right, let me change my share. It's just in a new tab, and I thought it was sharing the whole browser. Here we go. Okay, you see ChatGPT now?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's try to use our Coco framework to tell the model how we need to solve this this issue, or this kind of thing we're working on. Let's call it a project. So you don't have to type it out as like Coco. You don't have to describe what the context are. It'll get it. But I like to do it just for the sake of this demo. So we have context. Now I have to type in front of people, and it's so stressful. Objective, constraints, oops, and output. Okay, so our context is, let's say, small nonprofit with a large volunteer base. We've received feedback from volunteers about how we engage with them. And then I have here just some notes here. So I'm gonna copy these notes, these made up notes, from, let's say we had a meeting about this. Oh. Let's see if it'll let me copy them or if it'll just go to the next. Okay. Let me copy them. All right. Oops. All right. Here are the notes we took, well, we took during a debrief meeting. And of course, we can add so much more to this. This is kind of a made up scenario, so we're a tiny bit light on context, but hopefully you all are getting it. Okay, so the objective is we need a list of action items to address the feedback, and maybe an order, some input on the, or well, let's just say we need a list of action items to address the feedback. We'll just see what we get from there. Constraints, let's say we have a team of 5. That's probably a familiar scenario for many of us, with limited capacity and a very small budget. Okay, so the outputs, what might be a helpful output for this? So let's say I would like a checklist of actions, what resources each action might require, and a high level timeline for implementation. I would like to see this information presented in graph form. Graph, chart, graph, chart. A digestible chart. Okay, I ignore my typos. All right, so as you can see, it is going to work. We got an action item, we got priority, we got what it solves, we have resources, we've got a suggested owner, and we didn't give it, we don't know. Are there department managers? There's their volunteer coordinator. We didn't give it that information in our context, and we could have. So this might be not relevant for your team, but as you can see, it's put together a ton of information that gives you a much bigger, much easier kind of launching off point because you're reacting to it than if you had to sit down and do all of this yourself. Could you build this out? Absolutely, you could. Any one of you could. I believe that. But it would take you time. It would take you time to think of all of these things. And so now you get to expand upon some preliminary bits of information that you've given it, a preliminary, let's say, a draft plan of action that you get to then change and adjust and customize for your organization. And look, it gives you tons of other things. Here's the lean timeline. Here's the MVP on checklist. Like, this is the bare minimum. If you can't do more, here's where it is. And this is the model listening to you saying, I have a really small team. So, and then it gives you some other helpful advice that you can listen to or not. You decide with your human judgment what is relevant for the organization. So hopefully that was at least a little bit helpful in terms of a demo of how these things can work. Of course, we have lots of other examples, lots of other things, and you will no doubt want to continue to experiment. I'm sure many of you have before. Before we get to your questions, I want to just do a quick recap of what we've learned and covered today. So we've talked about how AI works and the inherent risks involved. We talked about the need for an AI policy. To get you started on thinking about that policy, we also talked about what AIs are really good at and not so good at. We've talked about some of those general guiding questions to ask yourself before potentially using AI. And then we talked about a framework for developing an LLM prompt. And as Kelsey mentioned, I have all of this information in a handout. So that you have all of this information at your fingertips. And of course, you have my email address here, so I'm happy to help you with any questions you have, any guidance you have. I'd love to turn the time over for questions from all of you. And thank you again for being here. While we're kind of asking questions, I'm just going to put this up here. So if you'd like to stay in touch with me, I'd really love that. Got my LinkedIn. I know you'll have a survey to respond to from Kelsey, but if you have any time to just respond to a 5-question, 2-minute survey just about how your organization is using AI, I'd be more than happy to share back that data with you all, because I think this is a question we're all wondering. What is everybody else doing? This is so new. So as I continue to learn from all of you and from my own research, if you'd like to contribute to that and give me your feedback, I will happily continue to kind of share out the data as it grows.
Thank you so much. And Leah, if you want to send me those, I will add that in the email as well. So just we can, if you don't have the moment to do it right now, but still want to provide some feedback, I'll have that in the email.
Thank you.
So we will have some time here for questions, but I did want to take a moment just to say thank you so much. I feel like this was a really digestible way to think about AI and its uses, even if you're already using it, just to what kind of questions should we be asking? What's a comfortable way to approach this? So this felt like a really good overview for me. And I hope maybe for the rest of you you have a couple of takeaways. And so now if there are questions, you can type them in the chat, or you can just go off mute and ask as well. And also,
sorry, I would just love to know if you have any, I mean, and I guess I could ask ChatGPT to build it for me, but I would love to see a sample or two of organizational AI use policies. It's something that we know we want to do here and that we need to do here, but it's always helpful for us to have something sort of to start with, like this is a really good example kind of thing. Or should I just put it through ChatGPT?
So personally, they're, as we've mentioned, these models are trained to keep you engaged. They're not necessarily going to deter you from using them for various use cases. I think they tend to say, oh, we could totally write that grant for you. And as any of you who've ever written a grant know, grant writing, there's so many little tiny judgment calls when it comes to grant writing. An LLM really just cannot successfully navigate all of those. And I'm sure you also are well aware of the way that the AI voice is kind of being mocked, and it's giving people this hunger for, like, give me a typo, give me something I know a human wrote, because I am so tired of this very similar sentence structures and things that ChatGPTs write out. To your other question, I have not seen many AI use policies, which is a reason why I'm really passionate about encouraging people to develop them. Now, some other organizations, Salt Lake City government, for example, has an AI use policy. And if you go and read it, it's not super long. It touches on a lot of the things we talked about today. It's no personally identifiable information needs to go in the models, or can go in the models. It needs to have human review everywhere. Anything that is substantially produced with AI and not changed much by a human needs to be labeled as AI generated. These are the kinds of things that are showing up in the Salt Lake City AI use policy. And most government organizations are, especially in Utah, there is a state statute that says when it comes to technology, of which this falls under, you need to have a use policy that protects citizen data, all of those things. So I think most organizations are waiting to see what happens, waiting to see how these tools advance, waiting to see if there are any problems before they start developing an AI use policy. I think that being proactive instead of reactive in this area will serve anybody who dares to do it. Does that mean you take the time, you write a policy, and you never have to look at it again? No. I really like to liken these policies as the types of policies that we've had to learn and navigate since the advent of the internet. So when the internet first started, people were clicking on crazy links and getting viruses and getting their information hacked and sending all their bank information to a random person in an email. And over time, we have had to learn how to navigate those risks as a second nature. Anybody can write something on the internet. That doesn't mean you believe it. And this is no different from that. It's new, but it's so similar in its application. And just like we could never operate our organizations without the internet, you will not be able to operate without AI because it has just absorbed itself into the tools that we are already using and relying on for our organization. So coming up with an AI use policy, in the handout that I have for Kelsey, there is a really incredible framework from the excuse me if I get it wrong, the Technology Association of Grant Makers. And it's findable on Candid as well for those of you who use Candid to look up donor information. I have it linked in that takeout. It's really good. It's really comprehensive. And so there might be things in there that you're like, this doesn't apply to us. And that's okay. But it's giving you the areas you need to think in. It's giving you the questions you should ask yourself. And I think it's a really good place to start when considering an AI use policy. But with any kind of policy, the idea is not to just write it down, check a box. The idea is to assess where you are today and how AI is being used within your organization and tailor your policy to that. You're going to need to understand who's using it, how they're using it to be able to correct any behaviors and make a decision for the future about how you're going to use AI thoughtfully to make sure that everybody can, one, understand the policy and two, abide by it. So that's my long-winded answer on what are the AI policies out there. I don't think there are many. There are a few. They are interesting and they are helpful to read. But when you're coming up with your own policy, you need to make sure it's specific to your organization and you need to think through what would that mean to me. Thank you for that question. It's a great.
That's a really excellent question. So thank you and great answer, because I think one of the things that I would just really encourage kind of following that up is having these conversations with your board and staff, like how are you currently using it, and almost start to document your practices, like how you're using it, and your practices will help inform your policy or where maybe you need to set a harder policy in place. But I think that's really helpful to think about. And yes, I think we have a few use cases where Rachel was kind enough to go and grab the city's AI policy, so you can see it in our chat. Do we have any other questions?
I have a quick question. I do fear that I'm going to sound a little naive and outdated with this, but I gotta ask, shouldn't we maybe wait till the tool's more ready? It sounds way more harmful than helpful. And as well, I am having a lot of trouble getting past the ethics part of the whole thing, because it's using copyrighted information.
Yeah.
And if I'm using it, then I'm also stealing that information. There's no really laws around it right now. And I don't know if they are making kind of progress in fixing that part of it as well as all the other problems that you mentioned. But that's kind of where I'm at right now with my thoughts.
I love this question because it's not, is AI good or bad, right? It's both. It's both. And there are really scary risks and there are really exciting possibilities. And, you know, one does not come without the other, right? Like you don't get all the benefits without taking on some of the risk. And I think this is a particularly challenging conversation for nonprofits because we are not driven by profit. We are driven by mission. And there are so many different types of nonprofit missions that might not jive with AI, right? Like I saw somebody put into the chat, the water and energy resources. If you are a nonprofit focused on water conservation, can you use this tool? Can you go to your donors with an AI written thank you note? Probably not. That probably hits on some of the ethics and the trust issues that will ultimately undermine your organization. But this is why it's important to slow down and think about, as it relates to your mission, as it relates to your vision, what can this do? In what ways can I use this that does align with my mission or vision or not? And if it's not, how do you talk about it? How do you tell that story to your donors, to your funders? Because guess what? Your peers will. Your peers will use these. And there will start to be differences in the outputs of some of these organizations who are using AI prolifically. And some of those will be like, this seems lazy, this seems generic, this doesn't excite me at all. And the people who are just kind of doing the human stuff are going to feel like they're standing out in some ways, but it's just going to be this massive sorting through of who's doing what. And that doesn't need to matter to you. For your organization, what you need to understand is how you tell the story about where you fit in the landscape. Because if you go to a funder and you say, we are all about water conservation at our organization, and these AI data centers use so much water, and we don't have a solution for that, and so we have opted not to use AI. And that is our policy, and that's where we stand. That is telling them something about your mission, how you hold up your values, and why your grant might look a little different than somebody else's, right? You have to be able to tell that story and know that you've thought it through and you've made a conscious decision on how you're using these. And that's the point. It's not about whether you use them or you don't, or you think they're good or you think they're bad. It's like having a reason for using them or not using them, and being able to articulate that and align everybody within your organization to that same use case.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Great
Thank you.
question.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And one thing that as we're still learning something that's new that's coming out for me that I think is really important is just to stay engaged in the conversation. You don't have to make a decision on it right now, but staying informed will help you make a decision, right? This will continually change and evolve over time. And so kind of just staying up on the conversations will be really imperative because, as Leah says, other organizations and entities will use it. So you being informed and understanding how they're using it will help you build your comfort and how you want to engage with that, like how you're going to decide how to engage with it. So I will say that we're just 2 minutes over, so I want to be very respectful of your time. I do want to thank you all again so much for being here. I think this was a great conversation. If you have follow-up questions or just want to touch base with any of us, we are available. Leah has shared her contact information, and I'll put that in the follow-up email as well. And again, thanks so much for being here today. I'll hang on for just another few minutes if anybody has another question. So thank you all.